I'm a survivor of CIA MK Ultra mind control, which is a very systematic form of mind control. And I was used on a White House Pentagon level, primarily during the Reagan-Bush administration, and was right there in the swamp among these perpetrators who steal elections and traffic children. And he wrote our constitutional values of freedom and justice for all. So I witnessed all that. I saw what was going on while I was in that swamp. But I ended up in the swamp because back in 1957, I was born into a multi-generational incest-based family. My father was sexually and ritually abused. My mother was sexually abused and trafficked to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge. The Blue Masonic Lodge is where secrets were kept. You know, these secret societies, their secret is how to manipulate our minds. And we need that knowledge. That's our defense against it. But nevertheless, that information was at my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge, which was comprised of a lot of local politicians, law enforcement, people of influence, judges, people in positions of power. And my father's sexual abuse of me extended into trafficking me to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge and to child pornography. About 1960, my father was caught sending child pornography of me through the U.S. mails. And he was approached by one of those local politicians that I had been prostituted to as a toddler. And this local politician came to him and told him he could receive immunity from prosecution if he would agree to sell me into the CIA's MK Ultra mind control project. Well, already we're seeing, you know, the courts have been corrupted a long time. This was back like in 1960. And all they have to do is invoke national security on any case. And it's allowed for the pedophile agenda to go on all these years. The pedophile agenda is a mind control agenda.
That was referred to as the right to remain silent. That's RITE, as in ritual. This involved Congressman Vanderjack and the head of our church at that time, a Father Don. And they subjected me to an occult blood ritual. This was so horrific. It was this reversal of the Catholic Mass. It confused my mind because when a person's operating on a subconscious level because they're so traumatized that consciously there's no place for what they're enduring, the subconscious mind has no ability to discern and to question and to reason the same way that the conscious mind does. And this reversal of the Catholic Mass into occultism just made it all seem to run together in my mind. It was absolutely horrific. This blood ritual was so horrible that my mind readily accepted the mind manipulation that I endured afterwards, a hypnotic language, the neuro-linguistic programming, mind control programming that actually changed the way that my brain was functioning. So that, you know, that part of my brain that I said would open up to deal with my father's abuse again and again? They changed that so that they decided when, where, and how that particular compartment of my brain would be opened and accessed. And they replaced the triggering mechanism with hypnotic codes, keys, and triggers, hand signals. There's also phone tones that can also open those neuron pathways and give access to the compartmentalized memory as well. They replaced that at that time. And this was with this right to remain silent. I also had a silence in my head after that, because up until that time, I heard, it was just my own voice, but I heard my voice arguing back and forth with all these different perceptions and from the different compartments in order that I could formulate some kind of a decision about things. I remember before the right to remain silent that I had some free thoughts of my own, and I had hoped for a place in the world where people didn't abuse each other. I'd hoped to have 10 children that I knew would be at least 10 children in this world that weren't abused. I'd hoped for those things, but with the right to remain silent, I lost my capacity, my ability for free will thinking. I lost my ability to even hope anymore. I lost all free will entirely. This right to remain silent silenced this argument that always went on in my head, and instead, all I ever heard from that point on was the voices of my abusers directing me, telling me exactly what it was I was supposed to do. I could only robotically follow those instructions and carry them out.
But I think there's a thirst of knowledge when it comes to human trafficking and sex trafficking. And that's kind of what I think helped blow up my page, because people are thirsting for that knowledge.
They are. And like my website, trans-formation.com, a lot of people go there for information on what they can do and how they can recognize it and what actions are being taken, because people kind of are onto the idea now that we've got a lot of corruption that's been rooted in government for a long, long time. And it's up to us. It's up to the people to, drain the swamp from the bottom up, so to speak, so that we can effectively restore the kind of decency and morality to our society that we're wanting. People are wanting solutions. This is really a time for that. So I also went to, I opened up the cathyobrien.locals.com, and Locals that's one place I found where I'm not censored at all. And so I'm just posting everything there, and getting information out, because people are seeking it. They're wanting to know, all right, what can I do? How can I be effective? And how do I recognize this human trafficking, which has become the most lucrative business on the planet? Follow the money. And we're going to see that it's funding these puppet masters who are ushering in this great reset. And with trauma after trauma after trauma, people are realizing, they're being manipulated, and they want to know why and what they can do about it. Repetitiveness is the most basic form of mind control, and trauma is the basis of any mind control. And people are onto that now. They're saying, well, what can I do? And it's like, well, awareness is key. Knowledge is our defense. Spreading the word, to each other out in our communities, heart to heart, eye to eye, soul to soul, making a big difference. And opportunities like this, where we can bring this information out to all those people who have found you as a great resource of applicable and important, timely knowledge.
Yeah, I'm just the middleman though, because that's basically what me and other people do. We just get what the true hard workers, yes, I research for interviews. Yes, I do. But the ones that have put all this stuff on the table, that have sacrificed also, and physically probably sacrificed to put all this information on the table, like you, so many other researchers. And I know you're more of an insider, sex slave, you was part of the inside, but still, it takes guts to do what you did, and everybody else that brings all this research to the table, and everybody, I'm telling you, this book right here, it came out in 95, I believe, but I wasn't awakened then. Like, it was 06 or 07, I think, when I got this book. But so Transformation of America, it's loaded with information. We're going to cover some of the stuff in here, stuff that she's already talked about many, many times. But the thing is, this isn't for people we're going to be talking about things that people that know of Cathy O'Brien may not have heard before, but we also need to cover things that people are unaware, because we need to expose, all this corruption, the evil when it comes to sex trafficking, human trafficking, and the occult nature within our government. But so let's take it back a little bit, Cathy. Well, where would you like to start for the ones that don't know much about you? You know what I mean? Because I think your story is so important. I think we need to start with, I guess, ground zero of what years later led you to write that Transformation of America.
Yeah. Well, I'm a survivor of CIA MK Ultra mind control, which is a very systematic form of mind control. And I was used on a White House Pentagon level, primarily during the Reagan Bush administration, and was right there in the swamp among these perpetrators who steal elections and traffic children. And he wrote our constitutional values of freedom and justice for all. So I witnessed all that. I saw what was going on while I was in that swamp. But I ended up in the swamp because back in 1957, I was born into a multi-generational incest-based family. My father was sexually and ritually abused. My mother was sexually abused and trafficked to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge. The Blue Masonic Lodge is where secrets were kept. You know, these secret societies, their secret is how to manipulate our minds. And we need that knowledge. That's our defense against it. But nevertheless, that information was at my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge, which was comprised of a lot of local politicians, law enforcement, people of influence, judges, people in positions of power. And my father's sexual abuse of me extended into trafficking me to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge and to child pornography. About 1960, my father was caught sending child pornography of me through the U.S. mails. And he was approached by one of those local politicians that I had been prostituted to as a toddler. And this local politician came to him and told him he could receive immunity from prosecution if he would agree to sell me into the CIA's MK Ultra mind control project. Well, already we're seeing, you know, the courts have been corrupted a long time. This was back like in 1960. And all they have to do is invoke national security on any case. And it's allowed for the pedophile agenda to go on all these years. The pedophile agenda is a mind control agenda. And the reason for that is the very reason I was brought into MK Ultra mind control. It had been found through Hitler-Himmler research that was brought over into the US with Project Paperclip when we imported the Nazi and fascist scientists into the US. Anybody can research that for themselves. We didn't win World War II. We brought it over here. And with them came the formula for mind control. And it was found that the formula for mind control is the same, whether it's of an individual, of nation, or of the world. And trauma is the basis of it. There is no trauma more horrific on the human mind than sexual abuse of a child prior to age 5 while the brain is still forming. It is known that our mind-brain function, the way that our minds respond to trauma, it's like our conscious mind freezes in fright and leaves our subconscious mind wide open to being easily led and manipulated. This defense mechanism of our brain is something that we need to understand so that when we have national trauma imposed on us and our conscious mind is frozen in fright, we understand our subconscious mind is being bombarded with repetitive narrative and being told what to do and being manipulated with no conscious mind filter. Our subconscious just takes information in like it's programmed. So we need to understand that, and to understand that there's nothing more horrific on the human brain, on the human mind, than sexual abuse of a child. So that's why I was targeted for MK Ultra mind control, specifically Project Monarch, which is a genetic mind control study, because it had been found in the Hitler-Himmler research that after 3 generations, any information, knowledge base, belief system, abuse base becomes autogenic in the brain. It's genetically inherent after 3 generations. So in my case, it had been 3 generations of abuse, and it was considered that babies would be more compliant and easily led, whether they're abused or not. Add the abuse on top of that, you got a very manipulated child who's very compliant, and then add the structure of systematic scientific formula of MK Ultra mind control to that. And that's how I ended up being used on a White House Pentagon level. In addition to the fact that the local politician who gave my father immunity from prosecution and thrust me into the project to begin with was Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford went on to become the unelected president of the United States. As his political career escalated, so too did my victimization in MK Ultra mind control until I was used in black ops by these perpetrators who are ushering in what Adolf Hitler, George Bush, and Joe Biden term the New World Order.
So, George Bush, they're not quite as benevolent as many people would say. They have some dark roots in way back then, what has led all the way up to whatever, with all the bull crap that's going on today, right?
Exactly. It had been found that it's a small handful of perpetrators. It's a small handful. Follow the money and it goes right to the top. The same people in control over and over. And I think, a prime example of that is look at Gerald Ford's cabinet. He had George Bush, the head of the CIA. He had Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld. He had Henry Kissinger, who together they've already had, people can research this too. They already had a plan for depopulation in place for this New World Order agenda. He had Nelson Rockefeller, and he also had Jack Valenti, who is head of the Motion Picture Association of America. Jack Valenti is the one who covered up the Kennedy assassination, along with Gerald Ford, who headed the Warren Commission that gave us that one bullet theory. That trauma on our nation is when this New World Order, Great Reset, globalist agenda took a strong hold on the government here, as well as the minds of the population, because that traumatized the whole nation. And at that time, Jack Valenti, as head of the Motion Picture Association of America, he decided what we would see on TV. He was over all that, the news media narrative, what was going to come through. So when people questioned the one bullet theory, when they questioned the Kennedy assassination, they were called conspiracy theorists. Jack Valenti gave us that terminology. That's when that first came into being, was in the wake of the Kennedy assassination, in order to continue the narrative that Gerald Ford was feeding us all. Because Ford had come up with that, he was given the office of president. He was unelected and just given that position because of this takeover that had occurred with the Kennedy assassination and that was covered up. So he had Jack Valenti, head of the Motion Picture Association of America, as his press secretary, to be able to continue to manipulate the minds of the population into accepting this new rule, this new order of things that was being imposed on humanity on a global scale, but strongly in the US, particularly once Ford got into office. So, that's something we can all look into and research and find out, oh, it is the same handful of criminals over and over. Follow the money, it's still going to.
And how odd is it? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but how odd is it that we're doing this on Patriots Day, which is 9/11?
Yes.
And then you talking about conspiracy. We're going to get back to everything here in just a moment, but here in just a minute, I'm going to ask you about where you were on 9/11 and what you thought. But anyways, when you're talking about conspiracy, how the CIA and all them created that term, conspiracy theory, back there in JFK. 11/22 of 63, whenever JFK died. And then it's weird how they created that term because of JFK. And two of the biggest things that ever happened in America is JFK and 9/11. It's two they're up there when it comes to the biggest things that's ever happened, atrocities. And then we hear the rumor of Father Bush being there on scene in Dallas. I don't know if it's a rumor, it could be true. I think it's probably true. And then fast forward to 9/11, then you have son Bush Jr. He's the president. And then we're talking about the conspiracy
Total.
theory. And then we're talking about the conspiracy theory. Remember him saying after 9/11, let us not whatever to outlandish conspiracy theories. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So where
Yeah.
were you when since this is 9/11, we're not going to be talking about a lot, but it all interconnects. Sex trafficking, human. I think it all connects. All
It
these
does.
deep, dark
It does.
conspiracies, this occult reality that we live in. But what were you doing that morning? And what did you think when you saw the planes hit the tower?
As soon as I saw it happen, I knew that it was inside job. I knew that it was being done deliberately to manipulate the minds of the population and traumatize the nation. It certainly did exactly that. The media's repetitive narrative, let's bring up these two national traumas. They say Kennedy assassination, you see the bullet hitting his head because that repetitive over and over, that traumatic image was repetitive in the media while we were being lulled to sleep and conditioned to cave into authority. Same thing happened 911. I say 911 and people see the plane flying into the tower. Whether that's even what took the towers down or not, that's what we see because that's what the media programmed us with the repetitive narrative on
Terror,
that.
terror, terror, terror. How many
Yeah.
times do you hear terror, 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 terror,
Yes.
terror?
Right into war. Right
Nukes,
into
nukes,
war.
nukes,
And
nukes.
yep.
Nuclear weapons, mushroom cloud, terror, terror, terror.
Yep, and we needed to, we definitely got control of the opium business at that time. So many wars that we've had have been for reasons way other than anything we could ever um, imagine until we start catching on to this ridiculous plan, this ridiculous new world order that's funding mechanism is drug and human trafficking across open borders, and that this was just all a part of that. So that was a massive trauma on the nation. And wow, so many people were led into war at that time and realized now that they were fighting in a war that had nothing to do with what they thought it did. And we have a lot of extremely PTSD and traumatized veterans as a result of that. And they're grasping the truth, which is like a compound felony to the horrors that they witnessed and experienced, to now have to face the truth of why they were really there. It's really hard, but it's something everybody is waking up to these days. They know that the Kennedy assassination was very pivotal. It's still censored. They know that 911, we lost so many freedoms at that time, um, in the name of security. So that national security secrecy has threatened the security of our nation for a long time, and it's time truth comes out. Truth really does make us free.
Since writing your book, it was 95, right? Your
Yes.
your book came out. Since writing your book, and you have three total, I believe, or four, three. But since, especially since the Transformation of America book, and then you and Mark came forward, and then I like for you to explain to the audience, especially a lot of newcomers, a lot of people waking up, um, who Mark was and how he helped you, and but since writing your book up until now, is things getting better or worse, do you think?
Well, so much has unfolded that was foretold in transformation of America. That's my testimony for Congress that was censored under national security. So it was put in book form to be able to just still get the information out there. Congressmen very concerned about what was happening to our nation, wanted that information out there, and clean members of Congress distributed it throughout both the House and the Senate, and throughout the FBI, the CIA, the watchdog groups that are supposed to be overseeing our justice system. The information went everywhere, and that's why Transformation of America was ever released. It was for Congress, who had a point of reference for the information. It was never intended for the public, but it still leaked out to the public and started raising awareness. And in Transformation of America, I mentioned that it was going to be the Bush-Clinton dynasties. They had already determined that. George Bush said that when people became disillusioned with Republicans leading them into the New World Order, that Bill Clinton as a Democrat would be put into office, and then they would keep it in the Bush-Clinton dynasties until Hillary ushered in the New World Order. Hillary was supposed to usher it in 2016. Of course, that didn't happen because by then so many of us were awake and aware of this New World Order agenda, the erosion of our constitutional values, that the sheer numbers of us overrode the rigged electronic algorithm to elect anybody that wasn't Hillary Clinton in the New World Order. I mean, people were onto it. They knew. And how amazing that we ended up electing a president who cared about we the people and exposed the swamp, exposed the New World Order plan and their funding mechanism of drug and human trafficking across open borders. So that was absolutely amazing. But Transformation of America was very pivotal in arming people with knowledge so that when it did reach that point, they did know that the elections have been rigged ever since the inception of electronic voting machines in the wake of the Kennedy assassination. Again, when these perpetrators took such strong control over our minds and our lives and our government, the rigged elections allowed for them to place complicit perpetrators in key positions from that point going forward. And I've been screaming rigged elections for 35 years because I was there. They didn't worry about elections, Democrat or Republican. If they were complicit with the New World Order, they knew they were going to be placed into high positions of influence and political affluence. So that had been going on a long time. But now we're on to the rigged elections. So there's a lot that has come to light. There's a lot that has changed. I've watched this New World Order plan, the way they had it planned, just spin completely out of control. And it obviously, now they're frantic and desperate and trying to regain control with everything they got. They unleashed mind control masters of virus on the global population to usher in their New World Order Great Reset, according to their timeline. And it's not working. People are just waking up more and more and realizing exactly what they're up to as they tip their hand. They even realize that mind control is being used to usher it in.
Yes. And David Icke calls it I believe he was the one that coined it, the totalitarian tiptoe. They do things in increments throughout time, because if there'll be a huge rebellion if they just laid everything, if they just declared martial law and if they did everything that they wanted to do, just like that, there'd be a huge rebellion. But if the totalitarian tiptoe method, take two steps forward, one step back, or it's just like the boiling frog syndrome. If you put if you boil a frog from cold water till till the water starts boiling, he's going to die. It's kind of, and then it's also just like the metaphor with the bathtub. You just do drips here. Eventually that toilet or the bathtub is going to get full. And I see an awakening happening. And sometimes on this show, because I interview so many different people, I can seem to be pessimist, but I'm not. I'm more of a realist. But I'm very optimistic. I see people waking up, but the thing is, like with COVID, yes, you had a lot of people that woke up during COVID, but still, people allowed all these businesses to declare where you had to wear a mask. They allowed society to be shut down. You know what I mean? And we're allowing billions being sent to Ukraine, where it's like, that's just a few things. There's so many different other, the vaccines, like, I don't know. The thing is, we are waking up, but I don't think it's on the numbers that we need. And then when things are kind of like how they are right now, it's not too bad right now. But we seem awakened. We're talking on Twitter. We're talking, the comment section, or or face to face in person with people in the streets, or people you work with, or your family. You're talking about how you want change and all this, and talking about how screwed up the government is. That's all good, but if they release something more crazy than a freaking what we had what they did in 2020, if something's even more crazy, people's going to roll up their sleeves, people's going to bow down, because I feel like we don't act rational when we're in a state of constant fear and survival. You know what I mean? Like, what if COVID, what if that was just the government in the batter's box? They weren't even at plate yet. You know what I mean? And then we kind of acted irrational because we're in this constant mind control state of shock and awe and trauma by the mainstream media and by the government. And then what if the government steps up to the batter's box and releases something even worse? What's the fear and propaganda and mind control going to do that to us and our psyche?
Yeah. Well, knowledge is our defense.
That's how I can seem pessimistic. That's how I can seem pessimistic, because I see us waking up, but fear, trauma, and all this mind control, it puts us in a constant state of survival, fight or flight syndrome.
Until we evolve with the knowledge, and the evolution is happening. That's what gets me so excited, because I have such good insight into these perpetrators, and their greatest fear is the strength of the human spirit and the power of love. They can't stop that. It's our strength. It's where we win. It's where they lose. They're like this low vibration, dark, evil energy force that have been sneaking in for a long, long time. The 100-year plan, just slowly creeping in, just like you described so well, so that good people don't think to look for that kind of criminal activity, and they just been sneaking in on us for a good while. Well, they feed off of fear, they feed off of hatred, they feed off of negativity, they feed off of dividing the people. They just, anything negative, that's like their vibration. It's just so low. And after this 100-year plan, they're wanting to have 3 generations of compliance with people. They want it to be passed down genetically, autogenically in the brain, so that we're already caving into authority and looking more to authority. And we've been conditioned for 3 generations to look outside ourselves, to big government, big pharma, big cult religion, anyone to tell us how to live our lives, and we just give in to that authority. We forgot what we have inside of us. We forgot to look within ourselves, and that is by design and by structure, because that is their greatest fear. Without free thought, there's no free will. Without free will, there's no soul expression, no ability to gather that strength of spirit and power of love, to take a stand against them and say, no, I am not going to give in to your nonsense anymore. I am not going to comply. They know that that's human nature to do that. They know it's human nature for us to protect our children from this pedophile mind control agenda. So they've been slowly allowing for it to come in for a long time, so that they can create a generational compliance is what they're looking for. Well, it doesn't, it's not working. They already lost control, because people are onto that fact. They are looking within themselves. They are finding that strength of spirit. They are finding that infinite power of love and the infinite strength that comes when we believe in ourselves and our ability to say, no, I am not going to comply with that. Well, it's happening everywhere. And when they freaked out and went all in with mind control masked as a virus on the global population, they used the repetitiveness of the media, the people's fear of death, tapped into that. And when we look at the national and global death rate averages during that time period, it didn't go up at all. They just renamed every other death as COVID. You know, we didn't have any pneumonia and colds and heart attacks and stuff. We didn't have any of that. All we had was COVID when they were running those numbers on us to act like, you know, we're all going to die. And it was just fear generated. And then they told us to social distance 6 feet apart. That's to the subconscious mind, that's 6 feet away or 6 feet under, do or die. We've got to follow that. Well, it didn't matter if we were listening to TV, turning on our computers, walking into a business or a grocery store. It's the same repetitive narrative. Social distance, mask up, get the injection, over and over and over, every place we went. We need to understand repetition is the most basic form of mind control, especially when it's rooted in fear. So people started masking up. Well, masks are used in MK Ultra mind control because they depersonalize. You can't see a person's face. You don't know if they're smiling or sneering. You can't, it muffles voices and makes people feel like they can't talk to each other, especially from 6 feet away. And most importantly, inhibits oxygen to the brain, necessary for critical analysis-free thought. So as people caved into that, this mind control masked as a virus was taking a strong hold on people. And too many did get the injection, very unfortunately, and many are regretting it to date. Many can't even face the fact that they did that and won't look at it because they don't understand mind control. It's mind control. When we're not responsible for what we're forced to do under mind control. The people who abused us and programmed us are responsible for that, and they need to be held accountable for all that. And they still need to be held accountable for it. But nevertheless, while all that was happening, they made the biggest mistake of all. They told us to shelter at home. When we sheltered at home, it broke routine patterns. Whenever we break routine patterns, it opens neuron pathways in the brain. Park your car in a different spot, you're going to have to look for it, you know, and have to think, oh, where did I park it? You know, just breaking routine patterns opens neuron pathways in the brain. Mind control is intended to shut the neuron pathways down. So as those neuron pathways opened, people started asking questions like, what are they teaching my kid in school? They're indoctrinating them with a history that I've never heard of before. You know, people started realizing this was going on.
People started doing more research too.
Yes, they did. They looked at controlled media and they were telling us, oh no, that's a peaceful demonstration, while we watched our livelihoods burn to the ground with these violent assault on society. They were hearing the satanic reversals being imposed on people, and they were starting to question the narrative. They were starting to shut off the TV, shut off the devices, and get out in society and start talking to each other. So the Great Awakening ultimately started accelerating because these idiots made a huge mistake. But they always do. They always show their hand. They always mess up because they fail to consider, that strength of the human spirit and power of love that emerges as soon as we think free. Free thought is absolutely crucial, and it's important for us to understand that is why they are imposing mind control, why they are imposing trauma after trauma after trauma, and then repetitive narratives, because they need control over the minds of the population in order to inhibit our ability to gather that strength of spirit, to know our own infinite power, and to reclaim control over our own minds and lives, stand up for the children, and stop complying with these self-appointed, self-anointed leaders that we didn't elect.
Amen. Well said, Cathy. And to go back around Harvey's barn a little bit, to go back to something, and it, like I said, it all interconnects. It's one big giant spider's web. So when you got in from your father, brought you into the, I guess, the MK Ultra mind control network, how did that process work? You know what I mean? Like, like, can you go in more detail than just, I can imagine. I got a 9.5-month-old baby in there. I can imagine. I can imagine, me taking her. I think you were 5 or whatever, 4, 5, 6, something like that. But still, I can imagine taking her and handing her off. You know what I mean? So can you go through that process? Because there might be people listening that have similar situations, maybe not quite as, hopefully not as quite like yours, but maybe they can learn from your experiences. Can you go break that down a little bit more detail? How did that process happen with you going into these networks?
Absolutely. As quickly as my father sold me into the project, he was flown to Boston, Massachusetts, where he was trained by Cardinal Law how to manipulate my subconscious mind and raise me in the project. Cardinal Law is the same one who was caught up in the now infamous Catholic child abuse scandal. He was head of it because he was very much for the pedophile agenda being used as a mind control agenda. And there was a criminal faction of the Catholic Church, namely the Jesuits, that's the intelligence arm of the Vatican, that was hell-bent on being the one world church in the New World Order, had been since way back, and this was nothing new. They had long since learned the effects of trauma on the human mind through the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, burning the witches, all the spoils of wars. There were the children, and so the Catholic orphanages began, and the children were indoctrinated. These traumatized children were indoctrinated by this criminal faction that knew how to manipulate the human mind. So there's strong, long history there. And the Catholics were combining that information with what the CIA knew from Project Paperclip and the Hitler-Himmler research, and making a very, powerful form of mind control. So Cardinal Law was sanctioning this pedophile agenda within the Catholic Church for those mind control purposes and for this Jesuit agenda. So as quickly as my father came back home, I was subjected to occult ritual. And that happened within my Catholic Church. Excuse me.
So what are some of the, and I know you're healed and things like that. And I know you've you have you learn to grasp and cope. I don't know if you ever truly it leaves your mind. I don't know. I've never been through all of that. Like I'm sure it's you just bury it. You know what I mean? You put a lock around it,
Yeah.
but you still have residual memories from that locked box. Is that how you cope with things? And or can you explain some of these traumatic things that they put you through?
Yeah. Are we recording?
Yep.
Okay, great, great. Well, when my father came back from Boston, he started subjecting me to occult ritual within my Catholic church, which was very much complicit with the CIA. And the occult ritual, the blood traumas are very horrific on the human mind. And what we need to understand about our mind brain function is that our brains will respond to trauma with or without us. We don't, when my father's sexual abuse of me started in infancy, I couldn't think to know what he was doing was wrong, but my brain knew it was wrong. So it actually physically shut down neuron pathways around that trauma and repressed that memory so the rest of the mind could develop and function normally. Well, then I had another compartment for dealing with my father sharing me at my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge, another one to deal with the child pornography he was making of me. And now I had more developing that to deal with the occult trauma. Well, this shutting down of neuron pathways in the brain ends up where more and more conscious thought is lost. There's no ability to even think, especially when you have all these neuron pathways shut down. You don't have any intercommunication. You don't have the brain firing. So this compartment doesn't know what this compartment did, and this compartment. So there's completely no memory of what happened here to bring over to here. So
Is that when you create alters? Is that when you create alters when you're in that constant state like that?
It can be called that. Since the part that dealt with my father's sexual abuse would open up to deal with it again and again as needed. It's not multiple personalities. It's one personality that's shattered into these different fragments. So I had no inner communication without any conscious thought. Then there's no concept of time, and with no ability to know what happened here by the time you're over here, then the brain doesn't signal the body to be tired. So there's an extreme heightened endurance that results from this as well. There's many aspects that come into play with how our brains respond to this trauma. It's like my eyes were wide open trying to see trauma before it happened, and developed 44 times visual acuity, which is like having eyes in the back of the head. And this kind of traumatic development is something the CIA capitalized in MK Ultra, and the military capitalized so that they could have like military special forces who had the heightened endurance and had an ability to see with 44 times visual acuity, point and shoot and hit their target, with pinpoint accuracy. So there's many things about the way our brains respond to trauma that we really need to know about, because then we understand the repressed memory. We understand how we don't know about childhood trauma until we, turn like age 30, when electrochemical changes happen in the brain that open those neuron pathways back up and memory starts leaking out. There's so many amazing, miraculous parts of our mind brain function that have been manipulated against us that we need to remember and re-access for ourselves, because we have these amazing capacities within us. We have a heightened endurance. We have an ability with an amazing immune system, and so many things that we've already been blessed with all along that we forgot about. We need to quit looking outside ourselves, to authority to tell us how to think and how to live our lives when we've got so many miraculous aspects within ourselves. But they were being capitalized very deliberately back then while I was growing up, until I, had lost my conscious thought and could only do what I was told to do. I was told to go. I was brought to Mackinac Island, Michigan, which was the Epstein Island of its time. It was the Bohemian Grove of its time. It's where these perpetrators of the New World Order met in secret and discussed their plans and carried out their perversions in the process. Those perversions, this pedophile blackmail operation was going on my whole life. I was used in it. And they were being filmed and compromised with the blackmail, because these perpetrators don't trust each other either. They have each other by the blackmail, so to speak. So they were making the films then, and I was used in them. I was sexually assaulted by Pierre Trudeau when I was 9 years old. Pierre Trudeau is a master of was an MK Ultra master of individuals and of nations. And he believed in the pedophile agenda. And his son, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada now, is, who knows if that's really his biological father. Either way, he was raised by a pedophile who was hell-bent on mind controlling individuals and nations. So, they kept this in their genetic bloodline too, because they knew the information would pass down from generation to generation, be autogenic in the brain. And also, they would manipulate people. So at Mackinac Island, Michigan, I met who would become my owner in MK Ultra Mind Control, U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd. And Byrd was in office for over 50 years, held the country's purse strings, head of appropriations, decided where money would be spent. And
when you say owner, I'm sorry, Cathy, when you say owner, is that kind of like a pimp?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Exactly what he was. He decided who I would be prostituted to and when, who I would be used up by, which black ops I would be used in, who my handlers would be. He decided all of that. But he became my owner when I was 13 years old. The governor of Michigan at that time was George Romney, who is Mitt Romney's father, again, keeping it in the bloodline. George Romney was very much interested in what the Catholics had learned and what the CIA knew, and wanted to combine it with technology to make a more powerful form of mind control for the Mormon church. That's why we see Mitt Romney fluctuating between the Boston, Massachusetts Catholic end and the Mormon end in Salt Lake City, because that was a very deliberate mind control agenda that was brought in there. And George Romney was very much a part of that, as well as what was the groundwork for global education, Common Core. It was manipulating, indoctrinating children in education and rewriting history in the books so that children would be conditioned to march to the New World Order and to this globalist agenda with no idea of what economics are all about, so that they would just cave into the slave society agenda. But George Romney did all of that. But that was kind of like I said, the Epstein Island of its time, the Bohemian Grove. And I was taken there repeatedly throughout my victimization. From there, I was taken to various military and NASA and DARPA installations for sophisticated MK Ultra mind control programming, till I was just totally robotic and used on a White House Pentagon level.
And if I remember correctly, I try to pull up in some of my notes, I don't see it. Reading your book, you had interactions with the Clintons and Hillary also, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Can you explain some of those and some of the sadistic behaviors and just the malevolent acts of Hillary Clinton, and just how just evil that that bitch is.
Yeah, I am so glad to see the Clinton Chronicles coming back around. I mean, people were awake to that in the early 90s and all in the mid 90s when that came out. But it exposes so much of what I had known because my first handler that Byrd appointed was Wayne Cox. Wayne Cox was an occult serial killer, CIA assassin, mercenary, and worked the Clinton cocaine operations. He was in the backwoods swamps in Louisiana when I was sent to him in 1977 for further traumatization. And it was absolutely horrific what I experienced during that time. And I was used in Clinton cocaine operations then. The Mena, Arkansas CIA cocaine operations were already in full swing. I think that Bill Clinton wasn't even Attorney General at the time. He might have been going into the office of Attorney General. He certainly wasn't governor. He certainly wasn't president, but he certainly was just as corrupt back then with this funding mechanism of the New World Order. Him and Hillary both were very much involved in the New World Order agenda. Wayne Cox in his coven had Roger Clinton, who's a half brother of Bill Clinton, who was heavily involved in the occult end. And he was, together with Cox, under orders of Hillary, was already using the precursor to adrenochrome, where they take the adrenalized blood of virtually abused people. And there was an actual market for it that went in through the same CIA cocaine lines under the direction of Hillary Clinton. So that was like the precursor to adrenochrome that we hear about today, was already in place in 1977 when I was sent to the swamps of Louisiana. I've been talking about that for over 35 years. So it's about time, people saw that at least finally. There's so much information.
Did they ever take your blood? Did they ever?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, that was definitely a part of how I knew, and it was definitely adrenalized. I mean, it was just horrific what I witnessed and experienced in those years, and then in later years used in the same human trafficking drug ops that were established so strong back in those years. It was like the groundwork for NAFTA across open borders. There's many good people who tried to bring that information to light, like the head of U.S. Customs, William Von Raab, another amazing hero to us all, that tried to tell people that every time he made a bust at the border, national security was invoked and the people were turned free. And he wondered why drugs and human trafficking were allowed to proliferate at the border. And, goes right back to the Clintons, who have yet to be held accountable for their actions, despite the pleas of the people to lock her up.
And we saw how irrational and just crazy she was acting during that 2016 election campaign. She was just beebing and bobbing and spitting green goo out of her mouth, and remember that and into a bottle, and she was just so. And I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but does it come to a point? I'm sure it's some speculation, of course, but does it come to a point where these elites, these people that use adrenochrome or whatever they're doing for 30, 40, 50 years, like the Clintons and so many other elite families have, do some of them have like a burnt out method, and they just had their synapses in their brains just they're all over the place, it's where they act irrational and crazy, and because it's almost like she needed a fix, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're not like us, and they do not like us. There's not really much to even relate to about these these people that we share this planet with. They're so dark. They feed off of negativity. Like I said, they feed off of hatred, fear, anything negative. They feed off of adrenalized blood. They feed off of they literally feed off of terror. You know, I mean, they're horrific, and people are waking up to that. That supply is diminishing. So I would say that it's because so many people are waking up. But that's a nice thought. But I don't know that there's many who are whatever change. There are some at the top that, like I said, they're just not like us, and they do not like us. And there's not anything that's going to make them be like us. So we need to stop following these self-anointed leaders we didn't elect and hold them accountable for their actions. But first, we're going to have to establish, some semblance of justice to our system, and that's going to take some time. I mean, our justice system has been corrupted for a very long time. U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd had an office in the FBI building so that he could establish the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as a catch net operation for human trafficking and for the sex trafficking of children, so that they would be turned right back over to abusers, right back into the system rather than freed. So this has been going on a long, long time, and it's something that is that needs to be uprooted. We've got a lot of corruption to clean up, and it might be just easier to restructure around it and get active locally and make sure that our local communities will protect and defend the children.
I think one thing that we need to do is limit the terms within political office. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need these career politicians that are in office, whatever kind of office in the government that they hold for 50, 60 years. That's crazy. You know what I mean?
Like Byrd, well, Byrd knew he was going to be placed. He was being placed by this cabal, this new world order, the top, because of the influence that he did have, and that he did extend into eroding in our country. Having a close-up view of that, makes my testimony very powerful. It's no wonder national security was invoked on it, but it's something everybody needs to know, because as we clean up this mess, we have got to uproot the corruption all the way down where the seeds of corruption have been planted for so many generations now.
Who replaced Byrd? Do you know? Like, at the top of the, with the pecking order, I was just wondering if you knew who replaced him, because somebody had to. There's always somebody to fill in somebody else's, spot within the pyramid. I was wondering if you knew about that.
I'm sure they've got somebody in place, but then again, just go to the top beyond that and see who the puppet masters are that hold all the money and make all the rules. That's important to see. But there have been a lot of good people in government and intelligence who do oppose what's going on and don't have any more voice than we do. Or if it's somebody that gets in like Trump that's exposing them, then if they can't get rid of them one way or the other, then they do a character assassination on TV that, with the constant barrage on the minds of the population, by now, after impeach and indict, how many people, even those who stood by Trump from the get-go, are saying, oh, is he a criminal? Because the subconscious gets affected so bad. But, like I said, William Von Raab did all he could, and he's about scrubbed from the internet, but he was head of U.S. Customs, making a difference. And he was right there back when Mark Phillips rescued me right out of my victimization in 1988 to do all that he could, along with many, many others that were concerned and behind the amazing and noble efforts of Mark Phillips.
How did Mark Phillips approach you? Like, walk us through that process a little bit, because he was an amazing man in your life.
To
Um,
all of us, yeah,
all of
just an
us.
amazing, yeah, yeah. He was an intelligence insider, working the highest levels of intelligence mind sciences, studying how to preserve the sanctity of free thought, because he knew that without free thought, we didn't have our soul expression. And he also knew that there was a criminal faction doing all they could to use mind control to usher in a slave society agenda. So, as the level that he worked, Mark could wear any hat. He could be FBI, CIA, NSA, Secret Service, whatever, to be where he needed to be for carrying out his mission. And Mark was bound by laws of sedition, though, like anybody in intelligence, and he couldn't tell what he saw going on. He couldn't tell that he saw children being taken in and out of the White House, and he couldn't tell that he saw the blackmail operations eroding our justice system and eroding our constitutional values of freedom and justice for all. He couldn't say that he found information on our mind brain function being censored under national security for generations with a deliberate intent that we forget that we've got an amazing ability within us to defend ourselves against mind control, that we have this amazing ability to heal body, mind, and spirit. We are so resilient. That information was withheld very deliberately from mental health, from the medical community, from education, and from society as a whole, while this handful of perpetrators made us reliant on big government, big pharma, and big cult to cult religion. So he was very disturbed by all that and decided, since he couldn't say anything about it, he would do something about it. And that's when he lifted my daughter and I right out of the Washington, D.C. swamp of human trafficking, and handed me keys to my own mind. And by the time Mark came along in 1988, I didn't even know good people existed in the world. And you think about that, 1988, he took action before anybody even knew there was a swamp, knew the pedophile agenda was a mind control agenda, knew that child sex trafficking was being used as blackmail operations, and that drugs and human trafficking is a funding mechanism of this globalist agenda. So that was really early on. And for me, I didn't know good people existed, but I saw that his animals trusted him. And everybody I knew, people who abuse people abuse animals, and vice versa. And I only seen animals being abused. And with him, all these animals loved him, And so it was like I had these heightened senses that kick in when we don't have our conscious thought, our ability to think. These heightened senses kick in. So I had heightened senses like an animal would have. And I saw that they could trust Mark. Plus, I was turning 30 when those electrochemical changes happen in the brain, where the neuron pathways start to open up. And in addition to that, my brain knew I was safe for the first time, even though I didn't. Just like when I was an infant and my father was sexually abusing me, I didn't judge what he was doing was wrong, but my brain still shut down around that. Well, likewise, my brain knew I was safe, and so it was opening up. So I had all this memory that was just flooding my mind. And Mark told me, he said, the pen is mightier than the sword. You need to write out what you're seeing, write out your memory. And that's like a simple brain trick we all can use, because when we move a pen, the very action of moving a pen on paper activates the logic part of the brain the critical analysis part of the brain, the conscious thought, you know. So I was taking this emotionally repressed traumatic memory, shifting it over to logic, writing it out on paper where I was seeing it in front of me. And all of a sudden, I was healing on every level at once, psychiatric, psychological, everything. It was just, I was just having this healing through that one trick. We can all do it to reclaim and retain our free thought. Pick up a pen. If we get that writing by hand back into the school system, our children can't be indoctrinated. They will process information by writing it onto paper. Typing doesn't do the same thing, but moving that pen does. So Mark knew all these little tricks that had been, you know, deliberately suppressed.
Especially cursive, which is they've taken out of school.
Yeah, they
Because
have.
it creates a more fluid. Your mind is flowing. Your pen didn't really leave the paper that much, and it's flowing with your thoughts, your feelings, everything. I would say it's probably even better to write even in cursive, you know.
Yeah, and it's better that we do it with everything as much as possible, you know. Getting it back in the school system, everybody can do it for themselves, you know. Write out their fear, write out their trauma, write out what's immobilizing them, write out why they think the world's not waking up fast enough and what they can do to accelerate that. Because when you write out a negative, it 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 literally gets it out of the way. And then if you add a solution, and I spell solution SOUL, if you add a solution, that forces the brain to fire in new ways, that lifts us from the negativity and gives us a clear view forward. So it's like rising above the storm, you know. Just pick up that pen and paper. It's an amazing trick. But that was one thing of many that Mark taught me, while he reminded me that it's within me to heal. He reminded me that I had an ability to heal my body, that I could even bounce back from what I'd been exposed to there. And I began applying what he taught me. And it's in PTSD Time to Heal. Mark couldn't release that information and remind us all what we've been conditioned to forget. It's our innate birthright information. He couldn't release it, but I could, because it was my experience to heal with this information. And when I saw mind control masked as a virus being unleashed on the global population, I posted it on my website at trance-formation.com. I posted it there in ebook form so everybody can have it now, regardless of income or wherever in the world they're located. It has a pay what you can if you can option. You know, people zero out the total all the time, and that way there's no money traced back to their handlers, you know, that they're healing with this information. Because it's just a reminder. It's so easy to self-apply. And people are applying it to themselves to heal from any level of trauma, grief, losing loved ones, like so many people are, to be able to just reclaim their free thought from the constant bombardment of controlled media and the traumas we're being subjected to today. So it's easy. People are doing it. And it's so nice to be able to be on the solution end of things and sharing this exciting information, because it's like, come on, everybody, we can heal. You know,
Yep.
I'm living proof of that. We can heal from anything that life throws our way.
And I think a big plus is to turn the TV off. You know, turn the TV
Yes.
off, get outside, go for a walk. I love to take hikes, and I love to garden. I guess I'm a gardener, but I love vegetables and flowers
Yeah.
and plants, and that's something and I don't think about anything when I do that, or when I go take walks, you know, or when I exercise. But especially when I'm in the garden, I don't think about anything at all. My mind's free. It's at peace and zen, you know. and
Yeah.
and that's a big hack, because they don't want us to be at ease. But we need to be to detach from all the craziness in the world, but at the same time we still need to be vigilant. You know what I mean? Well,
Yeah.
I guess we need to learn how to balance the two. Kind of what we're doing right now, speaking, and people will see this is that's being vigilant. But it's not like I'm doing this all the time. You have to learn
Right.
how to detach. You have to.
Yes. Yes.
What are some things that you do to detach?
Um, Walk my dogs. Animals are such unconditional love. I definitely get out in nature all the time. Get away from devices. Um, whether it's TV, cell phones, I'm just not a cell phone person at all. I don't like that constant barrage. Sometimes I just need a break. I don't, no matter how important something is, I take a break anyway and just kind of get away from it all. But it's really important to maintain that balance. I eat really well, good nutrition, and sleep well. Under my control. I had so much sleep deprivation all those years that I didn't even dream for almost 30 years of my existence in MK Ultra. And now, boy, I'm making up for lost time. I'm a sleep queen. I love it. And I love to wake up slow, listen to my day, and
Yeah.
I just enjoy and celebrate my freedom every single day. I never take it for granted. I love that I have such an ability to attune to life's miracles and synchronicities and appreciate those. Um, Mark gave me a concept of time and strapped a watch to my wrist right away and said a concept of time equates to a concept of awareness. And that proved very true through my healing process as I opened those neuron pathways up. And I never had a concept of time before. So it gave me a concept of awareness and a continuity of thought to make sure that I wasn't switching into another compartment or that I wasn't dissociating and just, not being present. So it was very important. But about as quick as I learned that awareness and reclaimed my free thought, free will, soul expression, and my strength of spirit, and know who I am and what my life's purpose is, and the power of love, and all like that, I found that timing is more important than, time, this rigid time thing, because with the timing, there is a harmonious flow to life's purpose. There's so many miracles that light our path and lead the way. And they're a celebration of life every day too. And why I smile, because I get to live in that flow of my life's purpose and in that flow of love and harmony. And it gives me more strength, a bigger voice for the children's sake, to give voice to the vast numbers of children who have yet um, to find theirs because they're still being trafficked, and it's up to us to start waking up and making that difference for the children's sake. It's up to every one of us to reclaim our free thought, free will, strength of spirit, to get in that harmony and that flow, to get in sync with that. And when we do, we're going to find that the world is waking up on a mass scale. They are reclaiming control over their lives. They're growing their own vegetables and taking more control over our lives, kind of the way it was intended to be all along. But we forgot a long time ago. It's like we need to evolve back to the wisdom of the ancients. Get back in touch with nature, back in touch with some of the heightened senses that we really have, that we got away from because we're always listening to something. We need to listen to what's within.
Exactly. And we need to take accountability of our own actions and responsibilities. Hence something, I guess this is solution aspect too, because we always hear about the younger generation, this and that, these kids these days, and these young kids, that's in high school or getting out of high school and college. And the thing is, and it's the same with me raising my daughter. he's about to 9.5 months old. It's each current generation, each current younger generation, or I guess with all the bad things that's going on in the world, we got to quit pointing fingers at the younger generation, take ownership, and realize that each current younger generation is a byproduct of the flaws from the previous generations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Well, I had
Because
so many good,
the younger generation didn't create the Federal Reserve in 1913. The
right.
younger generation didn't send their boys and the boys to Vietnam War. You know what I mean? Like, younger generation wasn't all about peace, love, and harmony, and being a product of the CIA mind control in the 60s. And like we got to take ownership. And what I'm trying to say is we got to accept now and raise our kids better for a better tomorrow. you
Yeah,
know
exactly. With a free thought and their soul expression, because soul is stronger than genetics. And it was easy to overcome even my genetic influence, because soul is stronger than that. The power of love, the strength of the spirit, it's all right there. And when we look into the children's eyes, oh, it's so amazing to me,
mm-hmm.
because life hasn't got in the way yet. They haven't been bombarded with life structure. They're still attached to the infinite. They still have the
They're pure.
the intuitions and the senses and the telepathy. They know what your intention and your thinking and is that. It's so beautiful, the purity of that. It's something we need to get back to within ourselves. Tap back into that childlike innocence is more than just running around going outside to play. It's about who we are inside before life gets in the way and structures us and tells us how to live and what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to get our job, do this, do that. No, before all that, go back to the innocence, go back to the purity of that. And I think when we find that within ourselves, we're going to be able to impart that to the children and start reviving the wisdom of the ancients and reviving life the way that it's intended to be lived, so that we all can live our life's purpose.
The ancients were very creative, very artistic. That, yes, they had a knowledge. Look, of course, they didn't have quite the technology that we have, but they had different types of other knowledge and technologies. And they use their creative powers. And what I'm trying to say, you imagine the ancients back then, they were given their younger offsprings like Adderall and ADHD medicine.
I know.
Let them be creative. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure, I don't know. I will never give my daughter, you know, um, the medicine, but like, let them be creative. Like, that's normal. They're jumping up. They're full of life and joy and happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, don't dumb them down.
Right. Right. Oh, it's so exciting that, wow, what an amazing life your daughter's got in front of her, just because of your attitude. And it's like, it's so exciting seeing this unfolding in so many ways on the future generations. And it's so important that we begin remembering who we are first. Like when I began healing and writing out my memory and everything, it was like, how can I even live with myself after what I've been forced to do? How can I deal with that? And Mark told me, he said, you're not responsible for what you were tortured to do under mind control. But now that you're aware, you are responsible for everything you do going forward, for every breath, for every, you are responsible
Speaking
going
out and
forward.
everything.
I know. It's like, wow, that was so amazing. It was like having a clean slate. And he also said, you know, your abusers are responsible for that and they need to be held accountable. And that stands today with the same people who have been manipulating the minds of the masses with these biologicals and mind control abuses that they've imposed on us, and trauma after trauma, the sexualization of children and everything else that they're doing. They need to be held accountable for that. We need to take a stand and start taking responsibility for our lives.
I am afraid of my daughter's future with that if things don't get better, though. And I've seen you talk about or write about like your book, Transformation of America. I think you wrote or talked about transgender.
Yes.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, the pedophile agenda, again, is a mind control agenda. And when children are sexually abused, they have an identity disorder, an identity confusion. And they're just twisting that and saying that identity confusion is gender confusion. It's not. It's, we know what we're born with, the physical anatomy. As for sexuality, it is all confused. And healing is possible from all of that. In my case, the sexual abuse that I endured created a heightened sexuality. And when I found out, finally, when Mark Phillips and I fell in love, he was like the first sex I ever had because of the love involved. It was like, wow, it's just a completely different thing. So the healing on every single level of what's been imposed on our children is extremely possible when we go back to that love that we are inside, to our life's purpose and who we're intended to be. We overcome all of that. And I think people are catching on real fast that this transgender movement is just the pedophile agenda being accelerated and accentuated by an inability to procreate, because once they get the surgeries, they're not going to be having any children. And again, that's part of the depopulation plan to reduce our numbers to a more manageable size. So that's what that's all about. And it's something that I think is going to fade out very fast, because so many people are fed up with the sexualization of our children and this so-called gender confusion, that's identity confusion, that was further accentuated through mind control masters of virus. Because when they had to mask up, they had the depersonalization, which accentuated that even more. When you think about it, our children went from being masked up and separated from each other and have plexiglass between them in school to stuffing dollar bills in tranny panties. What is that? That's insane. And people realize that, and they're seeing it. So I have a lot of hope for where we're going from here, just because so many people are awake and aware. And I think by the time your daughter grows up, she's going to be, she's already born into the most pivotal point in humanity's history. What an evolutionary time, and she gets to be on the leading edge of the evolution. And how beautiful is that? I'm excited because of your awareness, what she will grow up to be, and that's hope for the future. That's hope for humanity. It's hope for us all.
I'm not alone either. There's thousands, millions,
I know,
like that, and something, we got about 20 minutes left. So I didn't want to interrupt you earlier. Whenever you were talking about, you had the congressional hearing, right?
Oh, the congressional testimony. Yeah.
What year was that? And did they ask for like any, I know it's probably hard, but were you and Mark able to have any type of proof, like physical proof or documentation or anything that you brought to the table with that testimony?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. 1995, Bill Clinton was president. Is there any reason why national security would be invoked? Of course. But up until that, when I started writing out my memory, as quickly as I wrote it out, Mark turned it over to clean members of intelligence, law enforcement, U.S. Customs, William Von Raab, all researched that information or investigated it. There were so many members of Secret Service that come forward. There is nothing happens in the White House that isn't filmed, I mean, really. So all the evidence was there.
So that little bag of cocaine didn't have any video cameras on it. That was
really. The absurdity of this, the absurdity.
If you or I did that, they would know that, hey, Cathy O'Brien dropped that bag of cocaine right there in the White House. So it must have been somebody of importance.
I brought plenty of it into the White House, that's for sure. Well, so everything in Transformation of America has been validated, and the evidence was overwhelming, all ready for Congress, all ready for testimony until national security was invoked on it. So national security was invoked on it because it's true. What that did is it stopped me from being able to have any justice, but it also stops them from being able to sue me because it's already validated, it's already true, it's already got national security on it. So Transformation of America is totally validated, and the evidence is overwhelming on all of that. So
did they put a time? Did they put a time? I know when a lot of things are under national security, there's usually a time frame, like a 30, 40, 50, 60 year or something like that. Like to where they keep it under tight lid, to where after so many years, maybe I'm confusing something else, but
no. But think of the Kennedy assassination and how many times it would reach the end of its national security,
right,
and it was just reinstated. So as long as they need to keep something quiet, they'll keep it quiet. But because this one forced national security, and the fact that national security was invoked in open court March 17th, 1993, in my daughter's case, the national security allowed for the information that has already been proven to be released. And then Mark and I could start speaking out on that information, which we did. We spoke out on my daughter's behalf, trying to raise awareness to her plight. And it was love for her that motivated us. It wasn't bitterness or hatred for these perpetrators. That's their energy, and they're not going to get any more of that from me. So love motivated me the whole way. But members of Congress were very, very disturbed over what was going on and made sure that information was distributed. So that's how Transformation of America came to be. Access denied for reasons of national security, as details Mark's in my journey through the corrupted justice and mental health system on my daughter's behalf. It exposes the FBI's involvement. It exposes the so-called Child Protective Services and their complicit attitudes with this whole human trafficking operation. So there's a lot of information exposed there too. But it shows what national security did and how that hindered us from getting information out. I mean, if we'd have been given full broadcasts of the information back in 1995, maybe we wouldn't be in the position that we're in today. Maybe this information would have armed people with knowledge that's our defense against mind control sufficiently for people to have said no and refused to comply with mind control masks as a virus. I never complied. I never wore a mask. I never did anything. I never did any of that. I knew what it was about. Trance also even has the vaccines in it and how they're being used for depopulation. Very important information that should have been out there from the get-go. It is available. It's just that national security does take its toll, but it's also allowed for me to keep speaking out all these years, and I am not going to stop until.
Has your life ever been threatened have you ever had somebody in the shadows that come to you in the dark and say, Cathy, you better quit speaking about these things?
Many times. And Mark and I, we've had situations and circumstances where we'd be on the other side of it going, did we just survive that? Because it was like impossible situations. But I don't know. Sometimes I think there's something bigger than all of us, that until we complete our life's purpose, we're going to be here, because I can't imagine how I have survived all that I have survived to this point, but I'm still here. Very, very unfortunately, we all lost a hero in 2017 when Mark passed away. And yeah, so he dedicated his life and gave his life for the sanctity of free thought, and I'm going to honor him with every breath I take and keep speaking out. And I decided that when he passed away, I made a conscious choice then that I would just carry our life's purpose forward and honor him with everything that I do, because he gave me that ability for free thought, free will, strength of spirit. And I'm not going to cave in and let that go now. I'm still here. If I'm here for a purpose, and I'm going to live it. And I'm going to do it with love. And I'm going to do it in honoring that amazing hero and soulmate that I had the luxury of enjoying a loving relationship with for so many, many years. How fortunate for me to even know love. A lot of people go through our life and never know a love like that. It was a beautiful relationship from the start. I loved Mark from the get-go, but he wouldn't have anything to do with me because I wasn't healed. And he told me, he said, you got to know who you are to have something to give in a relationship. And that was great motive for me to heal even faster, And so as I looked to see who I am, I couldn't base it on other people's opinions of me, because that's what I experienced the first 30 years. I had to find out who I am at the base core energy of my being. And I found that energy to be love. And once I found who I am and understood my life's purpose was so clear, then I did have something to give in a relationship. And with that free thought and that absolute strength of who I am, it made me 100% in who I am. And Mark was definitely 100% in who he was. So, we weren't 50-50. We were 100-100, and we didn't always agree. And that was good, because one of us got to learn something, and it always worked for the best.
I guess what I'm about to ask, I hope it's not personal. What everything you talk about is personal. You've thrown out you've told your life story with mind control, sex slave, and all of that. But like I said, I've been following you for a long time, since probably, like I said, 06, 07, 08, somewhere around that time. But I don't really remember, like I said, with personal. I hope it's not personal, but I just want to know, how is your daughter now? Is she okay?
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so sweet.
What I mean is, like, how is she okay? Like, up here, is she healed, and like, how is she doing?
She's free of the system. That's the best part. And she is just peacefully living her life pretty much in nature, and enjoys being in the real world and living her freedom. She's not on social media and not living that way. That's just not where her interest is now that she's free. But she was horribly damaged by what was done to her in the system, and she struggles in many ways. But nevertheless is just happy to be living free and living love. It's like my daughter and I were abused together horribly. I could never protect her from being born into MK Ultra. I never could protect her from the abuses. When she was in the system, we found from each other that, you know, she told me that she always thought that if she took the abuse, that I wouldn't be abused. And I was taking the abuse thinking she wouldn't be abused, but of course neither of it worked. We were both abused. And it was just an amazing realization. And then while she was in custody, they told her that her past wasn't real. And she said, your beliefs don't change reality. And they would tell her horrible things about me, and it couldn't change our relationship, that the depth of love and purpose that that we share. So no matter what's happened in life, we've always had a strong bond, a very profound love and deep understanding of based on our life's experiences that I think very few people ever, you know, completely understand. So we have a very telepathic and deep relationship, and it's pretty amazing. She told me at one point, she said, how many other mothers would take on a whole government for their kid, you know? So, you know, I mean, she just was really, really, really an amazing and loving person. And I just wish that that she didn't have to struggle like she does. And I look forward to the day when maybe I can provide enough financial relief in her life where she can just realize all of her dreams and not have to struggle.
So it sounds like whenever you came forward in the 90s, that they were trying to, or whenever it happened, they were trying to say none of the experiences that your daughter went through were real, because they thought maybe they could mind control her to the level, because she was younger and she didn't witness and see all the things that happened. She made it all up, and trying to separate the mother-daughter bond also.
Yeah, couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. Truth doesn't go away, and neither does love. This is an absolute, you know. And I think there's a very purposeful aspect to it too. Something that she realizes. I think her spiritual understanding or her higher self insights are amazingly profound. You know, I think a lot of people could learn from her. You know, it's just, yeah. And no matter what anybody told her, they couldn't stop it. They couldn't separate that or take it away. We had already seen safety. We had already seen love. We had already seen that goodness existed in the world. Neither one of us was going to let go of that.
What if one day, Cathy, she came to you and said, and I'm glad everything's good, well, you know, with her healing process and all that, you know, the traumatic past, I can only imagine, you know, especially since I have a young daughter in this world. But what if she came to you, and I guess I'm asking myself if something was that I was trying to put myself in your shoes, like, Mom, I want to write a book and expose all the things that I went through also. Would that be, what would you think? What would you say to her? Would that be dangerous for her to do? Would you not want her to? Because I don't know. Like, well, what do you think about that?
That's a very thought-provoking question on so many levels. And of course,
I don't even know what I would say if my daughter, because if I would want her to express her free will and everything, be her. But at the same time, it's like you might go down a road that's kind of dark. You'll get a lot of heat, a lot of backlash, a lot of people calling you names. You may experience some trauma again, you know. But at the same time, I want her to be her, and express life how she wants to express it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, you know?
Yeah. Well, it'd be like write it out, write out by hand all that you can. And aside from that, she's already made her own choice, and she chooses not to be vocal. Um, and it's something we've talked about, even very recently. And it's like she just doesn't want to have to be out there and take that aspect. She's very happy living the peaceful life she's living, and she knows that there's people out there, even that like do an identity thing and say they're her and they masquerade as her. She just laughs and says, good, let them take the heat from the feds off of me for a while, because there's it's so people don't have any clue what she has had to contend with and deal with for so long. And she has found a good balance for herself in her own way. And then standing there saying, go mom, you do it. Go ahead, you tell. But she doesn't have to. So yeah, she's amazing.
That's awesome. And so I guess to round things up here, we just have a few more minutes left. I meant to ask you this a while ago, but like I said, I try not to, especially the guests that I admire, love, and respect. I try not to interrupt too much. But I meant to ask you this a while ago. And this was a note I had. I actually asked this before with another guest, Alana Freeland. So do you think, like with transhumanism, these elites with those networks you was involved with, do you think that they use certain types of technologies? It could be even adrenochrome, it could be AI, it could be any type of technology or some type of technological feat that they have with life extension. Because if you look at a few of the New World Order elites, like David Rockefeller, who was 101 at his time of death, Father Bush 94 at his time of death, George Soros 92 and still alive, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth 96 at her time of death, Brzezinski 89 at his time of death, Henry Kissinger, which was he was 100 years old in May, and these are just a tiny few of these elites. So you mean to tell me that the majority of these elites from the past up into modern day don't die of things like you and I do, of cancer and heart attacks, strokes, and other means that the majority of us normal people do? Something just doesn't add up, you know?
Yeah, it's important to note that. Well, the information that we have within ourselves for being able to heal ourselves and from numerous things in our immune systems and everything else, they hadn't forgot that part. They know how to do it. They know what it is.
They keep it from us.
They do not give their children vaccines. I'll tell you that right now, and they haven't for generations. They do not participate in any of that big pharma stuff. They just run big pharma for the rest of us.
Most of them don't use cell phones either, and
they know about things.
Most of them live out in the boonies where a lot of these magnetic radiation that we live in, this soup that we live in, that they don't live in.
That's right. That's right. And they know all that aspect, and they know other keys to longevity too. And they just apply those. So it's more from those aspects of things. And we need to remember the amazing powers that we have within ourselves, and the amazing resiliency of body, mind, and spirit that we have, the amazing healing capacities we have. We don't need to have cancer. We don't need to have these other imposed illnesses. And we certainly don't need to have mind control masters virus. This is so ridiculous that people got so afraid of that aspect of things, when we have an ability to not get sick. I rarely ever get sick because there's a military special forces program called No Time to Bleed. And it's where they take a bullet and keep on going. We can regulate our own heartbeat. We can regulate our breathing. We can regulate those. Our brains regulate that. We can when we control our own minds and regulate that ourselves. So we have amazing abilities within ourselves that we need to remember that we can access. And I have no time for a cold. I don't have time for that. So I don't get one. And usually you'll notice people will catch a cold, like if they're going on vacation and they're like, oh, rats, I was just going to go here and now I've got this cold. Well, it's because they all of a sudden have time for it. We need to just realize that. That's how our brains work on so many aspects, but we can drive that. If it can be driven from the outside with mind control, then imagine what we can do driving it from the inside with our strength of spirit. That's something I choose to do. And there's aspects of that is well understood by these perpetrators you named, that they're applying to themselves as well. So, yeah, they know what to avoid and what to tap into. And we need to learn that, catch on to that. Don't get any more vaccines. Stop vaccinating the children. Don't mask up and give in to this mind control masters virus ever again. We need to evolve with the knowledge and then evolve back to what we used to know that we need to reaccess and anchor into again.
Perfect way to end this conversation for this time, Cathy. Just keep fighting the good fight. It was a treat, honor, a privilege. I salute you and thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.